I really want to dig into like straight into Dr. Gupta, and then I know you have the vet software as well. But
Sure.
help me understand, like I've read a bunch about it and explored Dr. Gupta. From your perspective, who is it for? Is it for the
That's a good
patient or
question.
for the medical professional?
It's definitely for the patients, and I think over time, as I've said like a few times, I think our goal is not about 2023 or 2024. I think it's about going on this long-term arc that I think everyone is now sort of joining. That AI is a revolution that's going to change the way we do everything, and more than the internet ever did. And I think that the synthetic thought and synthetic reasoning that AI can provide may render the job of the physician to be obsolete. And obviously, that's not going to happen this year or next year. But I think in the long run, we're probably going to look at physicians the same way we may have looked at, from the 1950s, people that were handheld or personal calculators that would calculate large numbers and tabulate them for scientists or bookkeepers and other people who, like people who took dictation as a secretary or something like that. Those old jobs that no longer exist, we're going to see that probably go up like tenfold or a hundredfold at exponential in a way that we've never seen before, where there's this just enormous kind of you know sea change in the way we think about knowledge work and knowledge workers kind of getting becoming obsolete in a lot of ways. And I think this is a positive thing because things only become obsolete when something better replaces them. And I think that physicians that I've talked to and worked with, after 20 years in pharma and investing in pharma, I think that there's this human fallibility that every doctor acknowledges. 50,000 people a year die from medical mistakes. No physician can keep up with every single new update in their field, be it dermatology, ophthalmology, cardiology, et cetera. There's 10 cardiology meetings a year cardiologists want to go to. There's thousands of papers that come out that they can't read. There's every clinical trial that they can't participate in. It's really hard to keep up with this stuff. And I think that, the machines can do that, and they'll increasingly be able to do that. So my hope is that we change the game for patients. It doesn't mean that we can't help doctors. It doesn't mean that we can't help nurses and nurse practitioners and physician's assistants. I think the whole healthcare system is broken in a lot of ways and can be fixed with AI.
Okay, so if I'm willing to be seduced by the idea that like, great, we can replace a huge sector of a very expensive part of our economy, which is healthcare, physicians, and then the kind of pyramid tier down from PAs to nurse practitioners.
Pyramid is a good word for it.
Right. If I follow the seductive idea, what fields do you see Dr. Gupta or even like localized AI like replacing? Because from the people I talk to, my understanding, I have a hard time. Often what I find, like, yes, you're correct. Like doctors get tired. They forget things. They cannot keep up with their CMEs. A lot of them are lazy. They want to go golfing. A computer's going to do that much better. It's always going to do that much better. It never gets tired. It never forgets anything. It can log everything. It can run Bayesian statistics way better than a human can. My question is, patients often don't know how to articulate what their problems are frequently. In terms of like the doctors, to me, there still strikes me as a hands-on approach that's needed. And you might think, well, you could replace a lot with tech. I feel like I've read for decades, like Michael Crichton. I don't know if you're familiar with Michael Crichton. He wrote a book long back when he was in medical school back in Boston called Five Patients, where he's talking about technology entering the medical field. And he, I think in the 1960s, was hypothesizing like, we're going to be able to build a lab so that your primary care physician, we can get rid of them. They can walk in, and basically what is now today the equivalent of like Ford Medical. Some device will scan your heart rate and your blood pressure. And things just move really, really slowly
Right.
and never got quite replaced. So like, help me dig into like how you see that transition happen.
Yeah, it's going to take a long time. And I think that there's some specialties that are better than others. Like ophthalmology is a specialty that requires real close examination of the eyes, right? There's like very hard to replace that. With computer vision, maybe we can make a dent in that, but there's also specialized tools that ophthalmologists use. I think that's like one of the last places to be replaced. But I look at psychiatry,
Okay.
and I know my own psychiatrist to stop doing inpatient visits, and I said, wow, that's crazy. And he said, no, all of us stopped because I don't need to see you, Martin. I know you're crazy. I'm kidding. The point is that you can talk to a psychiatrist, and they almost instantly can figure out what's wrong with you. Part of that is computer vision that Gupta can't do yet, but I think that I'm working right now on a therapist,
Okay.
and so to partially answer your question, I had to dive in, not being a doctor myself, and I think even most doctors would have needed to do this. I kind of dived into the theory of how medicine's practiced and like what does that decision tree look like. We sometimes call it a finite state machine, where there's sort of these 3 or 4 different states a doctor's in. The sort of one of the key states is gathering evidence, which is often called history. So you take this history and you take it and you take it and you take it, and doctors have a hard time with this, as do machines, where we just don't know quite yet when we're done. And if we would like to, we'd be able to take history, forever if we could. And this is one of the problems with EMR or EHR and stuff like that, where like with Dr. Gupta, my hope is that he'll really get to know you over a long period of time and your history will stay in the machine. If you switch doctors, you lose all that experience, right? Your local doctor moves out of town, passes away, whatever the case is. I know my doctor in Brooklyn, Yuri, he knows me really well. He's known my whole family for 20 years. But if I stop seeing Yuri, I have to see a new doctor that have to build the history all from scratch again. And if you've ever been in a doctor's office, it's a clipboard, right? You just write your stuff down on a clipboard and you start from scratch. And there's no EHR that's going to follow you around. And it's really painful. So the hope is that, this kind of thing will take history better. Doctors forget history, right? Their job is to like just remember everything. It's not easy. So they look at notes and the notes aren't perfect. And it's really a tough thing. So we've emulated this like history taker, and the history taker has to decide when it's had enough, when it's annoyed the patient to death. Because like the earliest versions of Gupta were really funny. We showed them to people and they were really annoyed because he kept asking every single question. If he didn't know, like, do you drive a car or not? Do you have pets in your house? Have you traveled recently? Like all those questions get really annoying and nobody wants to answer them. And it's the doctor's job to sort of only ask the pertinent ones. Like if you seem to have an infection, you have some really good questions you could ask. If you seem to have allergies, there might be some other questions you could ask. And sometimes those questions are like really off the wall. Like, again, a question like, have you been traveling recently to Africa or something like that? And it's like, well, come to think of it, I have left. There are questions like that. If you ever watched House MD or something, there are things that pop up like that. And so the finite state machine goes from sort of, have you taken enough history? Do I understand the patient's symptoms? And then, what's happening to the patient? How do I explain it? And what are the next steps? And obviously the problem with all kinds of AI right now is that there's no physical attachment to the real world. So Gupta can't perform surgery on you. He can't prescribe you a medicine. He can't really do a lot of things that a normal doctor could do. I think in the long run, my hope is that AI will be allowed to prescribe medicine. I hope that in the long run, AI will do physical activities on patients. We're already starting to see that. We're connecting to a dozen different medical devices that provide information, real-time healthcare information that Dr. Gupta is looping into to get, those vital signs from Apple Watch or Garmin or tools like that. So I think over time, like the devices will get there where like we could have blood pressure machines in our homes or pulse oximeters or things like that. And Gupta can be like, hey, your oxygen's dropping. You should go to a hospital. And just having your Garmin beep or something is maybe not enough. So there's a lot of options and opportunities here. And I think that, where to begin and where to end are things that are going to take decades to figure out. I like psychiatry. I really like psychotherapy. We're probably going to release our psychotherapist here in the next few weeks. It's being tested and battle tested now. But the idea of psychotherapy and seeing a therapist is something that I really believe in. After years of kind of thinking about it, not that way, I got into the literature and really understood that cognitive behavioral therapy and other forms of psychotherapy actually do have real impacts on patients. And sometimes they're the only things that can treat depression and anxiety that's been long lasting in a patient. And so I myself suffer from chronic anxiety. And I think that being able to recreate that state machine, which is more complex, believe it or not, than a physician state machine, is something I'm having a lot of fun doing. And I hope that we can release something like that. And the stigma of seeing a therapist, the cost of it is enormous. The comfort of going out of your house to go talk to somebody is really painful. So there's a reason the average American isn't seeing a therapist, but maybe should. And I think it's always helpful to talk to somebody. So to be able to do that would be really cool. And we're also working now with text to speech and other avatar technologies, so that hopefully instead of just seeing a chatbot, you might be able to talk and listen to a physician or a therapist, and then also a synthetic one, of course, and then also maybe see them and see their office, like the way we're having the Zoom call right now.
So it sounds like your roadmap is tackling the least physical barriers in the medicine field, whether it's psychology, psychiatry, any sort of, rather than like, I view it as a continuum, right? If you have ophthalmology, as you pointed out, to psychiatry on the very just communication based, like where do you see that continuum ending? Because like I'll be blunt in the sense that like I see Dr. Gupta as like a really efficient SaaS tool for physicians that could eliminate either a bunch of just doctors or PAs and cut down on kind of this middle tier of medical professionals that you go in, you see a practitioner and the doctor signs off in some back corner, that it can do a lot of the legwork, but there's still somebody at the back end that either comes in to talk to human, to be like, you said you took acetaminophen, what color was the pill? Oh, it was red. Okay, well, you probably took ibuprofen, you're allergic to this NSAID. There's things that a human just are required or often needed to do. That's why I view it more as like, do you see it as truly replacing doctors or reducing the medical?
I think that's the long run goal. I think like I'll give you a couple of vignettes that are kind of interesting.
Okay, yeah.
The first is like you and I have this like very, I hate this word, but I'm going to use it anyway, privileged sort of view of the world.
Sure.
We're from America.
We do.
We've got resources. A lot of our users are from India, Pakistan, Middle East, Africa. There are places even in America where it ain't easy to go find a doctor. I have a friend who lived in Idaho for a while, and he said it's a 3-week wait to see a GP. I can't just go down to One Medical or CityMD and get checked out. It's not that easy. Everybody knows the doctor in town. And sometimes if the doctor sucks, and you're not blessed with having a good doc in town, the next doc's 3 hours away or more.
No, I agree.
And it's not easy to treat patients or to get medical advice. A lot of times when I go to the doctor, I have like a stupid question, and it's not easy to get that stupid question answered because I'm not a doctor. I think I know quite a lot about healthcare, but if you're my brother or my sister or someone like that, and you have a dumb question, or my parents or whatever, and you're not a physician, your expertise lies somewhere else, as is 95, 99% of America, you might say, well, do rising PSA levels matter? At what point do they matter? That's a really tough question to Google. That's a really intricate question, and large language models have this compressed search engine in a box that can retrieve that information effectively. It's much better for somebody to go to Dr. Gupta than WebMD. There's no contest. So all the people that go to WebMD and all the other health sites, it's about 3 billion visits a month. And that's not counting Google searches that don't end up having a click through. So it's probably tens of billions of searches for health information that people are asking static tools. Those static tools will go away. And I think Google sees that future, Microsoft sees that future, and OpenAI sees that future. There is no point of me Googling about prostate cancer and going to a WebMD website written by a doctor and it doesn't answer my specific question. It's just a general prostate cancer question. And I can have hundreds of questions that are not in that document. But the internet is compressed into a large language model, and the tool can withdraw the exact information you need through this sort of vector algorithm. And that's the beauty of this technology. So I think that anybody that has a health question, it's not necessarily about getting a prescription or seeing a doctor. But if you ask, doctor, I have these terrible migraines. I take sumatriptan and nothing's working for me. What should I do? You can learn that there are new migraine drugs and that they might be useful for you. Of course, your doctor should be telling you this. But sometimes we trust but verify, right? And I think that the ability to do that is really nice. And we, of course, that's why, if we didn't trust but verify, nobody would go to WebMD, nobody would go to Healthline. Those are some of the biggest traffic sites in the world, because we are very curious about our own healthcare. It's very important to us. And I learned this the hard way. When I raised the price of a medicine, I learned that people don't think about healthcare the way a truly economics trained, rational person thinks about healthcare. People take healthcare and they think about it in an emotional way that's really important to them naturally. And again, maybe I missed this and I was naive about it. Maybe I was too close to the business to see this. But people think about healthcare in the way they should, which is it's very personal, it's very cherished, and they want information that's, even if they're told 6 times, there's no drug for you if sumatriptan doesn't work and CGRP doesn't work. And then, oh, it turns out there is, and people don't use it a lot, and people don't know about it, but you could try this, and that could save somebody's life. And I think that, the ability to give healthcare information to people more easily is a really great thing, and I hope it'll be a great business for us too. But the other thing about LLMs that's amazing is they speak almost every language, which in the old days of computer programming, to internationalize a website or a piece of software was a pain in the butt. And, getting all those languages right. And even there's some legendary stories about Facebook messing this up often, because this was way before LLMs, but they had to get specific translators. There's a lot of ways to say hi sometimes in a language. Like we can say howdy, we can say hey, we can say hi, we can say what's up, etc. And they translated a couple of these countries' hello statements really poorly, and people would go to the site and be like, "Oh, this is weird. I don't like this." And the nice thing about LLMs is they're like amazing native speakers. I speak a tiny bit of French, and I asked Dr. Gupta a lot of questions in French, and of course I used some translation tools to see, can it speak Mandarin? Can it speak Hindi? And it just fires off beautiful answers in these native languages. And to me, that's the amazing thing is like, America is very important to us, as is Canada and so forth. But, to be able to serve the whole world, and give it the best medical information I think possible, is something that's truly great. There are countries like Iran and others that came to us, New Zealand and the UK even, who said, can we consider a nationwide deployment? Because there are people in our countries that, whether it's the UK and sort of budget problems, or in the case of Iran, they said there's no hope for healthcare in rural Iran. It's a 3-hour trip to get anything. These people are extremely poor. Is there in any way we can get this sort of for free to those people? And of course, our answer is we'd love to help. It's an amazing opportunity to bring that to people. Of course, we're still a business, and we want people to pay for our product, and that's why we're rolling out things like the vet, the therapist. I think we'll have a nutritionist and things like that. And then we're gonna have a lot of other cool features that, again, want to make things more immersive. My partners and I feel like the days of a chatbot are kind of numbered. We're never gonna get rid of text, but I think that it's not a lot of fun to interact with people through this like tedious, laborious text system. It's a first gen.
It's like a command line prompt.
Yeah, it's a little painful. I think people want to have a warm feeling, especially people who are older. Us youngins I'm 40 now, but most people our age and below don't have health problems. We don't need to see the doctor but once a year. But people who are 50, 60, 70, 80, some of them see the doctor once a week. And I think that, this tedium is something that needs to be alleviated. As you get older, your interest in typing intensely into a chatbot probably wanes. I certainly can't see my parents, for instance, sitting there and typing away all day long. Being able to chat with an avatar, I think, is the future. What that looks like exactly, we'll see. I mean, our vision is that it looks like a Zoom call, and that, you're talking to something that looks and sounds like
some generative AI human that, I guess, brings us to like large language models, which is like, if you're being real, what do you think large language models are actually the future of AGI, or are large language models a gimmick at the end of the day?
Probably somewhere in between. They're definitely not a gimmick in the sense that they're profoundly useful, and that, for instance, if you wanted to know the date of birth of every president in the United States plus every prime minister in the UK, an LLM could generate that in 1 second.
Sure.
And that's amazing. If you wanted to know that without an LLM, you would have to go to 2 different websites, transcribe them, transpose, and put them in an Excel. It would probably take you 10 minutes.
Right. Okay. I think anybody who's used ChatGPT or Dr. Gupta would immediately recognize the utility of its ability to like synthesize vast pools of information very fast and effectively. But I'm not the expert on like large language models, but I can't help but every time I encounter ChatGPT and OpenAI or Bard or whatever it is, right? Especially with the large language models, I'm curious your thoughts, is is it really kind of a Rene Magritte situation? Are you familiar with like CC n'est pas un pipe? Right, like this is like the terrain is not the map, or the map is not the terrain. Where it's like we're getting a very reductive, like hyper quality mirror, and you can see it looks like a human, but it's not a human ultimately. Like it's not AI. It's doing a very clever synthetic, compressed search engine. I'm curious your thoughts.
Yeah, so I think we're at the cutting edge of a lot of this stuff, and we follow something called chain of thought, which has now evolved into trees of thought. And I think that I sort of have a bold bet that we probably can wrangle LLMs pretty close to AGI, and it's going to take some time, but I personally think we can get it done. Another part of my brain or opinion is that we do need other techniques and tools, and this is like the Jan LeCun school of thought, which is that you kind of need to simulate or abstract a little bit the human brain. And a good analogy for that is that LLMs are like Broca's area where speech is created in the human brain. And if you have a lesion or a stroke that affects Broca's area, you no longer are able to speak, even though in your mind you want to speak. So there's parts of the brain that just control speech, but there's also parts of the brain that control executive function and planning and emotion and other things that are really important to thinking and planning. And LLMs don't plan on their own, right? So we have to either contrive a planning module, which is okay. I've had some experiments where it looks amazing and sentient, and I've had some experiments where it doesn't. And then we also have to sort of contrive this, like, I guess Kahneman called it, system two, this kind of like really deep procedural thinker that LMs just are not good at all. For example, if you try to ask GPT-4 to multiply two 4-digit numbers, it does not work. It cannot do that. And this is the greatest technology that's been created in 70 years of computing, and it can't do a simple calculation. But I think that we shouldn't expect it to, because you and I can't multiply 4-digit numbers in our head either. So I think we have to use the tool the way that we'd expect. We have to provide it with its own tools. And if you give it a list of tools, it tends to be actually pretty smart about how to use those tools. So that's why I'm really excited about, kind of the therapist and maybe even another type of tool we could be coming out with that's not medical related. We want to look at all of the jobs that knowledge workers do and ask, can we do that? And some of it requires traditional programming. Some of it requires this interesting meta programming of LLMs. Some of it requires like fine tuning and training and stuff like that. That's in the LLM ops and deep learning ops world. And I think we're going to try and take a serious crack at making a synthetic lawyer, a synthetic accountant, a synthetic financial analyst, a synthetic, et cetera. And, the partitioning those skills, a synthetic financial analyst, a human financial analyst can do a lot of things. The first synthetic financial analyst, I think, will end up coming out with it someday, will be able to do like one thing really well that a financial analyst does. And as it like gets more advanced, it might be able to do more things. I think for like a synthetic doctor, Gupta is really good. Some people just call it triaging. Like it's really good at like taking some symptoms down and explaining what's probably wrong here and providing a solution or theoretical solution. And that's sort of what some people like to call triage. I think it's more than that, but I don't think that's that bad. Now, Gupta doesn't have arms or legs or a prescription pad, so that's kind of where it ends. But if you look at like a synthetic accountant or synthetic lawyer, maybe they would start by being able to do a confidentiality agreement, but it couldn't write a Supreme Court brief quite yet. But it would start like doing those little baby steps, and then eventually, ideally, it could do 40% of a lawyer could do, or 50%. So that's what I would say, Alec, about Dr. Gupta, is that even if we can cut 5% of the waste of healthcare, people visiting a doctor because they have a cold and they're not sure if they should have an antibiotic or something like that, Gupta will tell you to stay home and wait your cold out.
Save your money.
And so like just saving that amount of waste could save hundreds of billions of dollars. And I think that's a great thing. Same thing with lawyers. If we can cut down the amount of time we need lawyers by 10% in this country, we create a lot of productivity and savings that our venture capitalists and our capitalists could use for more success.
So what I'm getting from you is that like large language models have a wide application. Like definitely they could be targeted for sectors that have not had much disruption in decades, medicine, law, we can go on and on. But I'm like really curious, and you're a smart person, so it's like, is it asymptotically like just pushing large language models until there's some sort of AGI breakthrough with tools? Or do you ultimately think like large language models turned out to be like super successful at localized AI, and they're really good. We can do it with medicine, we can do it with law, we can start training these models, and we can make them super advanced. But it's ultimately just a stepping stone. And there'll have to be something, to use another kind of early 2000s Dick Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld quote, there's known unknowns, there's known knowns. Is there some other unknown unknown waiting out there, do you think, for AI beyond large language models that we'd have to get to actual general?
Two minds of it. Like, one part of me says for sure yes, and one part of me says for sure no. And I think that as long as you stay, on the balls of your feet and nimble, I think you can't miss it. It's very hard for me because I agree intuitively with Jan LeCun, the Facebook head of AI, the Meta platform's head of AI, that who invented half this stuff. That, and again, may have a tinge of jealousy in the sense that OpenAI stole.
Yes.
Got
all the glory.
It's got to be more complicated than that, right?
Yeah.
And I have a pet theory that Mr. LeCun, or Dr. LeCun, I should say, intentionally leaked the Llama platform.
I was going to ask you about, this is what you think, is you think Facebook conveniently leaked their own.
I think that, to use a Few Good Men analogy, I think Mark Zuckerberg ordered the code red.
Okay.
It leaked on 4chan. I mean, that's a very Zuckerberg do. So that got leaked, and now basically you have an OpenAI quality model that's out there. Not many people know how to use it right, but and that's why they came up with this paper just a few days ago called Lima, Less is More, and they showed you how to use the model.
That got leaked. Yeah.
And it's because we've been trying, of course. The day the leaks came out, we had it on our computers and we were rocking with it, but what's really amazing about all this, to take a step back, it's been 3 months. So you're asking me about questions that kind of like could sway the future of humanity, and we don't have answers yet. So part of me does think you need this like Lacunian, meta brain that does context switching. And Minsky, actually, Marvin Minsky, who incidentally we've learned now was Epstein's buddy, MIT AI pioneer, who passed away relatively recently, wrote a lot about this sort of context switching and attention switching, that our brain is like a bunch of diverse submodules that evolved separately, and that we've got like 10 or 15 of them, and that whatever part is screaming for the most attention, we context switch to it. So, and that kind of makes sense. Like, if you're being chased by a tiger, you don't remember what's going on cognitively during that period. You just know to run. And then if you think about the math problem, you can get yourself into a different almost mode. We almost can't feel it, but we know it's there, where we can do a calculus problem or something like that. And then there's other things where we can talk and not really think about what we're saying every single word and still have a conversation. And that's like the LLM. So like, we also need the tiger part, maybe that's cerebellum. We also need kind of like an executive functioning part. We need like an emotional part that governs our long-term views. And so all these things, I think, mostly are going to need new technologies, but we can make a poor man's imitation using an LLM. For example, when I asked LLM, what are your beliefs and what are your goals? It doesn't have any. But when I put it in a contrived environment where I give it dialogue from a number of users, it starts to develop these interesting beliefs and goals. I have this like playground environment I call Hume, which is David Hume, but also Human Emulator. And the Human Emulator is a room of people that are talking and chit-chatting, and it's almost like an RPG type game. And one of the players says, oh, there's a cave, north of here, and there's an ogre in the cave. And I can eavesdrop into Hume's brain, and I see that Hume starts to think there might be a danger here. There might be, and it's very fascinating to see the way I programmed his brain to evolve, and then his speech acts and how he decides what to say and what to think is also a really fascinating thing to watch. And I'm starting to see some sentience and emergence like that. But I also think that it would almost be too easy or too good to be true if LLMs are the final endpoint.
Sure.
We all know sometimes that happens in life. And, if this is it, this is it. And I think I want to be prepared. If this is really the last stop on the train to AGI, I want to be prepared. And if it isn't, I also want to be on the balls of my feet that next paper is coming tomorrow, and then I need to pay attention to it and be careful. Just today, we saw a Minecraft program where this came out this morning, where there's a Minecraft player that was trained on AI, and it seems to build houses and act like a human in the game of Minecraft, which is a substrate of reality, right? Our reality is more rich than Minecraft, but Minecraft is a lot of the same things that we do. We can talk, we can walk, we can jump, we can do emotions and things like that. And this little Minecraft guy is sitting around making a house, and it sort of looks like he's alive. And it's kind of a really neat thing. And those are, some of the things we're thinking about and focused on as we try to like make these synthetic people.
Okay, that makes sense. Was there a moment in time that you recall in your long and illustrious career dealing with the media where you kind of lost faith in their intentions or your willingness to engage with them? Was there a moment that you recall?
Yeah, it's funny when you grow up. Like I was a kid who grew up in Brooklyn and read a lot of media. I read the New York Post when I was a baby. I was just reading that, and then the New York Times and all this stuff. And you come in this like platonic form tabula rasa situation where you have no reason to distrust the media. And in fact, you look at the New York Times and how opposing it is, and it's been out since the 1800s, and I can really trust this thing. And then the first time it shatters your illusion, if it ever does, is when they talk about something that you know about. And that's rare, because most of the time when they talk about people, you don't know these people. You don't know the president. You don't know the center of the Knicks. You don't know any of these folks. If you're just the average Joe, at least. And so if you ever get into a position where they actually write about somebody it gets very interesting. So this first probably happened with my first boss, Jim Cramer. So Jim was not famous at the time. He was running a hedge fund. Most hedge fund managers are basically unknown people that are under the radar. There are a couple celebrity hedge fund managers now, but back then, nobody knew who even people like George Soros were, things like that.
Bill Ackman's, everybody's behind the scenes. Sure, yeah, everybody's quiet. Yeah.
Quiet. And Jim was the loudest of the quiet, but he was still not that known.
Mm-hmm.
He was not different from what he is today. So he was going on TV occasionally. He was writing articles occasionally. Okay. And I forgot what it was, but there was some smear piece. And there was even some litigation around it, I think. But it really bothered me because, especially when your first job, you look at your boss as your hero. And just, I looked at Jim as my hero. I still look at him as my hero because I love the guy. And anybody who knows him personally basically loves him because he's so energetic. He loves stocks. He loves the market. He loves business so much. And when he ran a hedge fund, he was very good at what he did. He made a lot of money. His TV stuff now, obviously, people kind of try to dunk on him and make fun of him for not being the perfect stock picker. But the reality is, when somebody has a microphone in your face all day asking you about every single stock in the stock market, it's pretty easy to look bad. It's also pretty easy to look good. And that selection bias can be kind of a pain in the ass. But he's also not a hedge fund manager anymore. He doesn't. When I worked for him, he woke up at 4 a.m. The guy was in the office standing up, raring to go at 4 a.m. And I think like that passion was infectious, and everybody that worked for him loved the passion. They didn't always love him because he was very intense and a hard driver, but we almost felt like he was our general and that we were his soldiers. And when somebody insults your general as a soldier, you get pretty upset. And so I read these articles and I would like have a physical like reaction of like, no, wait, I know this guy. This is all false. I see this guy every single day.
Do you remember what they said? Do you remember?
It was 20 something years ago, but the idea is like that was the first dawning of like, wait a second, this newspaper or this website is a business, and that business's role, just the same way our hedge funds roll, that business role is to make money, and the better story makes the most money for the readers, not the truer story, but the more interesting story. And that more interesting story is something bad about this guy because it'll color someone's opinion. It'll get that pathos of emotional reaction out of you. And so let's make this a play instead of reality. And I think that we see that every single day. And once it's laid bare for you, it's almost like losing your virginity or having this like, wall of innocence come crashing down. And you realize, holy moly, this, and it didn't fully do that for me at that point. It would take more years and years of my own sort of, exposure to media, people I knew, and then eventually me, to really see that, oh man, these people are in a lot of ways, I have a respect for the fact that they're running a business and they know how to do that, which is if it bleeds, it leads, sensationalize, bold, all the tricks that BuzzFeed's done and all these other places have done to manufacture, what they need to manufacture. And even places like the New York Times, which are eminently professional, but still will find ways to bend the rules. One of the biggest ones I know about is this thing called background. And I recently had this discussion with a reporter who was reporting on me. And I said, well, I would like this to be on background. I forgot that there's a difference between on the record, background, and off the record. If something's, and a lot of times it doesn't even matter because they'll lie anyway, but if something's on background, it's not for attribution directly. if something's off the record, it's off the record,
Yeah.
no attribution.
Yeah.
But they can attribute it to somebody familiar with the situation.
Yeah.
So I'd open an article and I'd say somebody familiar with the situation said Mr. Shkreli was caught, whipping his cat or something like that. And it's like, I didn't tell you could put that in the newspaper. And they said, well, it was on background, so technically I can. And it's like, I'm not a journalist. I don't know what these rules are, and it's something where they will kind of trick you into disclosing something without realizing you're disclosing it. I once told a reporter something off the record, and then he went and found a way to verify it without me, and then he wrote it anyway. And it's like, I almost respect the fact that they're so good at doing their jobs to, make some media company wealthy, someone like Rupert Murdoch or whoever is the largest shareholder of Disney, that I kind of respect the grind, but I also like the people that actually do it. I think it's frustrating to me to see them turn reality and truth into a business that is, not exactly, commensurate or symmetrical with reality.
That's a very measured take. Do you think you would have had that take? Like, has your opinion grown more nuanced? Has it grown more jaded? Has it where do you sit now in 2023, Martin Shrkeli? Is he willing to engage with the media? Is he distrustful? Does he what?
Definitely extremely distrustful. I mean, I think that some of what I've been trying to do is troll behavior to discredit the media, and I think everybody should collectively do this. But I had fun with Politico the other day. They had questions about my relationship with Vivek Ramaswamy, who's a presidential candidate, and I asked them for a contribution in order for me to participate in the interview. And I know anybody that's been in media for 20 years knows that nobody pays you. Maybe the National Enquirer or Star or something that will pay a paparazzi, but nobody pays for content. It completely delegitimizes the content. And the New York Times says they've never paid once in the 200-year history of the paper. They've never paid, or 100-year whatever history. They've never paid once for a story, and that's a good thing, right? But I knew it would be annoying for the person on the other end to hear that. And then the troll got worse when I offered to pay them to write nice things about me, which again, I know that would, never, ever, ever come close to even thinking about it. But I used the phrase that I would bless their Cash App in exchange for the positive story, which is a phrase I heard in jail, and I've never let it go since.
Bless your Cash App? Is that
to bless somebody's Cash App is to give them money on Cash App. And they actually printed that. And I was so thrilled. I have some friends that recently trolled CNBC. They were just moving some boxes, and they were out in the Twitter headquarters, and there were a bunch of CNBC reporters, and they put microphones in their face and said, "Were you just laid off from Twitter?" And the guy's looking around. He said, "Why, yes, I was." He never worked for Twitter, of course. And they said, "Tell us about it." He said, "Well, I'm trying to support my family, and they didn't even ask me or they didn't tell me, and I'm just throwing out, I worked there for years. I'm just throwing out with these boxes." And they were boxes they were moving for some other reason. And then, when asked what their name was, he said, "My name is Raul Ligma." And, it became hugely viral. His name's not Ligma, which is, a sort of a joke.
Yeah.
And so I think the point is the people should be treated how, it's a golden rule. Treat people how you would expect to be treated. And if you're going to lie about me or other people, and instead of telling the real story, the nuanced story. For example, Bloomberg just wrote a story that I'm living on $2,500, and I'm sitting there thinking, first of all, if New York City, you can't live on $2,500 a month. And this came from a court report where I had to disclose any financial relationships I had, and I disclosed that I do receive $2,500 as a consultant. I receive $2,500 a month. I'm helping a friend out with a specific situation, and I'm happy to do that for my friend. And I know that there's a possibility this would get disclosed somewhere. Well, Bloomberg took that and said, Martin Shkreli's living on $2,500 a month, and sitting here are you nuts? What in your mind decides that this should be the headline of the story? And the answer is it's vindictiveness. That would be a really interesting headline that people would read. And so I guess the point I'm making is I've now, after 20 years of dealing media, fully understand that it's a business. Mm-hmm. And the reporter who maybe even sort of has this self-aggrandizing view of themselves as the truth teller with the pen holding holding, truth to power, that actually they're just the cog in the capitalist wheel. They're helping the earnings per share of their media company be 1 cent higher than it was last quarter. And that's their role, is that they're worker bee, working a way to make Michael Bloomberg richer, working a way to make Rupert Murdoch richer, and that you should always view them in that lens, that they're not there to be the, Edward R. Murrow. They're there to, basically help their business make more money. And you're the content, you're the product. So one of the things I told the political guy was, why would I tell you what I know about Vivek Ramaswamy? I know a lot about Vivek Ramaswamy, and I like him, and I'm not going to tell anybody what I know, because it's all good things, by the way. There's no secrets. But why in the world would I tell you? Politico, you're a publicly traded for-profit company in Germany, by the way, and you want me to be your product. You want me to tell you stuff so that you can write it and you sell ads against it and you make money. Why? So because my ego needs me to be in the paper? Well, even though a lot of people think I have a big ego, I don't need to be in the paper and I don't want to talk to you. But they persist, and again, they use people as content. Mark Zuckerberg did a marvelous job of this. We all put all our photos, all our text, all our stuff on Twitter or Facebook, I should say, and he sells ads against it. He gets free content, and he gets paid, and we don't get paid, and it's pretty remarkable. And media has done the same trick for years and years, playing on people's vanity. That the old, hey mom, I'm on TV. Like, your dream is to be on TV because the reach is so magnificent. But of course, now we know through independent podcasts and journalists and websites and your own social media, you can be the medium of delivery. And I did 2 TikToks and got 500,000 views. I didn't spend a second thinking about these TikToks. I guarantee you my TikToks got more views than these articles did. And I can send my own narrative. If I want to say something about Vivek Ramaswamy, I can go on Substack. I can go on TikTok. I don't need to use Politico. And he even had the nerve of asking me, how would you respond to Vivek about something he said about you? And it's like, dude, if I needed to respond to Vivek, I would text him or email him or something. I wouldn't ask Politico to hash it out in public for everyone. It's insane. And I think that we see that the media is breaking down. It's largely broken. A reaction to that has been Vice, BuzzFeed, these more sensationals, even more amped up versions of old media. They've tried their hand at doing this. They failed. But we still have partisan media, which again, I think is unhealthy, even though I root for my team and I don't like the other team. A lot of times I'm disgusted with Fox, which is quote unquote my team, and Republicans. I look at it and say, this isn't right either. This isn't the ticket. I don't think we should be sensationalizing the stuff that, maybe I agree with it in principle, but I don't think we should be going overboard either. And I don't think we should be, this isn't how we learn and this isn't how we grow, like by fighting each other. It's not healthy. And I have a lot of friends who are very sober, normal Democrats. And when my Republican friends hear that, they're like, well, like who? That's not possible. And it's like, of course it's possible. We can all find a way to get over this and not be victims and pawns in what is in essence, this really dirty capitalist game that, is for no benefit. Pharma saves lives. Pharma keeps us alive. Reality TV and sensationalized news media, it only hurts people. And there's no benefit. There's no winner other than a Mayor Bloomberg, other than, Rupert Murdoch, and other than, Comcast. Those are the only people winning here. Everyone else is a pawn and loses. And we do want to know what's going on in the world. We do need news. We do need things like that. But unfortunately, the product we're getting from media is poison. And I think that, again, we all owe it to ourselves to try to help destroy it to the extent we can by delegitimizing it, by refusing to comment, by not giving in to the vanity that media expects you to sort of seek and desire.
So it sounds like to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you feel of like 2 ways about it. One, we'll take the Vivek example, like, hey, I know Vivek, I can speak to him on my own if I wanted to, 1. And 2, I can bypass, or most people can bypass in 2023, the legacy distribution pipelines and speak for themselves. And would you say that, like, you would recommend almost anyone just do that at this point? It's just bypass, whether it's Politico, New York Times, or Fox News, if they have something they want to say, to bypass those legacy pipelines?
I think it's healthy to look at the other side. Like, Vivek did some speeches where he spends like an hour talking in front of fireside chat type thing.
Sure.
Like, if you like Vivek and you want to see that, you should watch that. But at the same time, I don't think it's a bad thing to go see the other side of the coin, the discussion about it. Like, who doesn't like this guy and what do they have to say? I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But I think that you have to have the context and framework that if you look at this, like if you ever watch CNN, like they have a breaking news alert with red writing and a big graphic every 30 seconds, and it's like there's just news isn't that interesting. They've sexed it up, for lack of a better term, to make it interesting. So to me, like, the best thing to do is find the nuanced, intelligent person that may look like, again, their YouTube doesn't have thumbnails and all the little tricks that you need to survive on YouTube, but they're saying things that make sense and they have intellectual integrity. If you can find someone like that, even if you don't agree with a person, the people that have that intellectual integrity. I was on Michael Malice's show the other day. I think he's somebody that's like that. I think Lex Friedman, someone like that. You may not always agree with them, but if they have intellectual integrity where they can give you the other side of the coin on something, and Lex is, very, very agreeable person, but there are even people on the left that if they do have that intelligence that you can believe in and trust, it's okay to listen to the other side. But I don't like when you listen to a for-profit media company that's out there really optimizing and gaming the system for every click, every photograph, etc. When Bloomberg, when I was arrested, Bloomberg, I know this because I dated the girl who wrote the story. She wrote a story about my arrest. She said it was the #1 viewed story on Bloomberg that year, and that maybe she got a bonus because of that. But the point is, like, now you have an issue where the media knows that something like that is going to get a lot of distribution. It's almost like this tandem effort of like, let's this will get a lot of attention for us as government officials. It'll also get a lot of attention from the media, which is almost like an apparatus of ours. Let's connect this, and you end up having this like pipeline that's really dangerous in society. We've seen it with the president. We've seen it with other things, and sometimes it's called social justice, where the media takes up a cause, and the government knows that people are looking at the media. So the government starts to get influenced by the media and says, maybe we have to do something. And we saw this, like, for instance, with Bill Cosby, who was accused of a crime that happened a long time ago, and Harvey Weinstein as well. Neither people that I would invite to dinner, by the way, for Thanksgiving, or let my kids around, or my sister around, or something like that. But, the point being that, the Me Too season basically created an impetus for government to say, oh, we kind of forgot about these guys. let's go fix that. And because the media is paying attention to this, we'll be the good guys and good girls in the media's view now. And we need that for elections. We need that for all kinds of reasons. So let's do that. And let's go take advantage of this. And to me, that's not the law, how the law should work. It shouldn't be, an elitist group of people decide that this is a cause that they care about, and now all the sorts of like authorities respond to that cause. Justice is supposed to be blind. Again, I don't sit here and cry any tears for any of those guys, but I also sit and wonder, like, well, can anybody do this? Can anybody sort of write a story, get a governor or a district attorney excited, and all of a sudden let's get regulations in place? If we write enough about AGI being dangerous, can we make companies like OpenAI fail? That's something that there are people actively in media that are thinking that through, and it's dangerous because they don't necessarily speak for everyone. For example, the media said I was the most hated man in the world. We counted a number of times. Me and my colleagues walked down to lunch, just about 15 blocks away. On the way back, we had a number of people shout out "Free Shkreli," or "I'm glad you're home," or "Can I take a photo?" And not one person said, "Oh, Martin, I don't like what you did with drug prices," or "Martin, I hate you," or "Martin, I'm going to beat you up." Didn't happen. So the media says I'm the most hated guy in the world. It sure doesn't feel that way. It's like the clearest lie to me that, I've had dozens of rock stars, billionaires, rap artists, supermodels come to me and privately say, "Hey, Martin, I'm a huge fan of yours. I just can't say it out loud because it scares me. I'm not sure that I'm going to get canceled if I say that, et cetera, et cetera." And, I'm kind of the most banal guy. Like, I didn't say anything racist. I didn't say anything sexist. I didn't do any of that. I just tried to make as much money as I could for myself and my colleagues and investors. And, to a lot of people, that's what America's about. To a lot of people, that's like, I look at myself in the mirror and I say, I do try to do that myself every day. Why is this such a bad thing for this guy? And it's because the media said so. And everyone's afraid. It's almost like a mafia where it's like, don't cross these guys. They can hurt you. And
Sure.
whether to say something insensitive like Dave Chappelle or something like that, be careful of the mob. And the mob is these sort of journalists that sort of think they have this control over people, and they only have as much control as we're willing to give them out.
Yeah, I think that's a good observation. Speaking of people that came out publicly as fans of you, that I don't know if there's any resolution on, that I'd be curious to get your take on, was a Bloomberg reporter that famously wrote an article. You seduced some Bloomberg reporter when you were away. And did you ever respond or speak to that? Like, what happened to that? She apparently left her job, and you have some real powers of seduction, even through prison walls, Martin. That you're.
The truth is, of course, less interesting, right? So the reality is 100 times less interesting than the story. And I think I like Christy a lot. She's a wonderful woman. I think the reality is even Christy was seduced by the vanity of the media. To be nearly on the cover of Elle magazine is probably every woman's dream. And I think that the story is that I certainly never seduced anyone. Christy and I were completely platonic, relatively, she won my respect as one of the few honest reporters out there. She always told the truth about me, good, bad, or ugly. Sometimes I disagreed with it, but she still told what she thought was the truth, which I respected. And she fought her editors several times. When the editors wanted to characterize me as some demon, she said, well, the truth's more nuanced. And the editor said, we don't care about nuance. We care about clicks. Make this guy out to be the enemy and the bad guy that is going to get the clicks. People love bad guys. They love to read about them. Sometimes they secretly root for them as anti-heroes. Sometimes they just love to hate them. Whatever it is, make this guy the guy that we want to characterize and caricature. Over time, she came and visited me in prison many times. And, you could sort of tell when somebody has a thing for you. And we grew this little relationship. And we kept that through the prison walls over a year or two. It wasn't the right fit for either of us. I think we both know that now. And we're still friends, and I think that, I still hold her up as one of the few, journalists that is really honest. I don't love what she writes about me all the time. I really don't. Sometimes it really ticks me off. But, I think it's her best effort at the truth, which is what a journalist should be. And she didn't leave her husband for me. That was sort of this like story element that was really cool to somebody at Elle. She was already on the outs with her husband. Half of Americans get divorced. It's not a new thing. She had the distant imagination that I could replace her husband. I was willing to try that. She was willing to try it, but she was already going to break up with her husband. And so she did not leave her marriage for me. She didn't leave her job for me. Like, all this stuff is all kind of like exciting stuff. Just like the Wu-Tang thing, by the way. Like, I'm friends with the Wu-Tang Clan. I don't have any problem with Ghostface Killah. He doesn't have any problem with me. He just emailed me. Like, this is all a show. It's all a show to sell records, to sell clicks, to sell everything. And every time you hear about celebrities, dating each other or something like that, and I know you're smart enough to know this, but 99% of this stuff is all a profit-seeking motive. And if you're selling records for a living, you have to be in the news. And I don't sell records, but I think that it's vanity for the subject or some financial reason. And as you know, like when you watch nighttime TV, the only reason the movie star comes on the nighttime TV is every single time it's there to promote the latest film, right? They're not there for their health. They're there because, oh man, X-Men 73 is coming out. I really need to make sure everyone goes and sees X-Men 73. So Halle Berry will show up and say, yeah, X-Men 73 is coming out. I hope you all see it. And the theaters will get packed. It's a predictable formula. So to me, I think like it's just obvious if it's right, it's hidden in plain sight many times that, this is kind of what makes the media and entertainment world go round. And I'm so happy that, the podcast world and the YouTube world has started to supplant, right? More people watch YouTube now than television. And that means that more creators like you, like me, can make our own media. And if people dig it, they can watch it, and it fragments the power that people like Tom Brokaw had, or people like that we used to idolize and think of as like these really honest brokers of information, that we've learned that maybe they're not so honest. And it's gotten worse and worse over the years. And, we don't need that. If we want that, and we want the cheerleaders, the Tucker Carlsons of the world, who are eminently good at what they do, they're very entertaining, we can watch those. We also now finally have a choice where you can watch somebody like Lex Friedman, which is like, I'm hoping to go on his show soon. Sometimes a show can be like very painfully boring and very painfully flat in its affect. Like, there's no emotional rise.
You're right. There's no crescendo. There's no narrative swirl and arc of, yes.
Yeah, it's just interesting, but it's only interesting to geeks. Right. And, he's had 8-hour interviews. Like, who has the patience for that in a world where we want breaking news every 30 seconds, right? So if you like that cerebral thing, you can watch Lex Friedman, or you can watch you, or you can watch me. there are times when I'll write a computer program for 10 hours on screen, and like, who wants to watch that? I don't know, but somebody does. And I'm happy to do that. But falling into this trap of like instant gratification and ADHD news is something I'm hoping that more and more of the world sort of takes a step back from.
That makes sense. Well, we'll wrap up with a really banal question, but I'm sure a question that everybody, thinks about and hears a lot about, which is, Martin, from your perspective, AGI, so that's artificial general intelligence, good or bad? Do you share the Elon take, or are you on the I'm losing the person's name that disputes Elon every time, but where do you?
We have a group called EAC, which is Effective Accelerationism, and I was maybe not quite the founding member of it, but one of the earliest adopters. And our leader is a anonymous guy who's named Beth Bezos, so it's just a portmanteau or whatever, funny rearrangement of Jeff Bezos. Incidentally, Jeff Bezos follows this guy now, so he's quickly. So our belief, and I can't speak for everyone in EAC, but our belief is that technology serves humankind, and that we should not be afraid of AGI or AI, and that we should accelerate it, not retard it. I think there are people out there that want to pause it, want to slow it down, and so forth. But I believe in a world where humans won't have to work anymore, that we'll have a utopia. Nobody likes the punishing reality of work. To the extent that you want to work, it should be optional. And I think that over time, machines will give us that ability to like, for example, if you wanted to be a creative writer your whole life, and you can't do it because you got to work at a construction site because you got to put food on the table, that's a sad situation. You should be able to be that creative writer. The reality is that we don't have that because we have a system in place that has worked really well. And I'm the biggest defender of capitalism. But over time, I see machines taking a lot of the crappy work out of our lives. The reason we have a dishwasher and a washing machine at home is because it kind of sucks to hand wash dishes. And I think that every single thing we look at in our daily lives and realize that it's a lot easier to do X or do Y instead of the old way. AGI is just a new way. And I think that it's the final way in a lot of ways, right? It's like the end of one chapter of humanity. But we've ended other chapters of humanity with the Industrial Revolution, with electricity, with things like that. And we can't, I guess one of the things that a lot of EACers believe, and I certainly believe the hardest, is that you cannot stop progress. And any Elizabeth Warren, any President Biden, any Vice President Harris, you can try all you want, but you'll never, ever stop, the accelerationism, because humans have, a desire to explore, a desire to reach further, a desire, unfortunately or fortunately to some people through, Ayn Rand, for example, an ego. And that ego drives us to achieve greater things. The person that develops AGI is going to be viewed, I would say past Einstein, maybe even past, this is almost blasphemous, but even Jesus, like, this is a pre-humanity, post-humanity question. Mm-hmm. And, the person that does this is going to be so remembered that who wouldn't want to be that person? Who want to go down in the annals of humanity as the person that gave birth to Prometheus to this synthetic thought? And that's why I'm doing it. It's like the money is interesting, but the ability to be regarded in history as the person that gave birth to this. Now, I don't think it'll be me per se, but I think that whether it's maybe John Carmack, who's working on this as well, who's like a dark horse front runner, in my opinion, to be the person, it is so important. So I part of me also is coping and hoping that, it will be good, because it's possible it won't. It's possible that these AGIs will treat us like termites or ants or pests. Ironically, I think that, something in the middle is much more likely, that AGI may be indifferent to humans. And maybe we may look at it, they may look at us as like, kind of a curiosity that we coexist with. For example, we coexist with all kinds of animals peacefully. We don't know just quite yet. My hope is that they're very human-like and that we integrate with them. But I also wonder if it'll, what'll happen. I do think we can control AGI, thankfully. I don't believe in this silly Terminator, what we call doomerism, where, we won't be able to unplug the computer, so to speak, because it'll quickly distribute across the world's internets and it'll like solidify itself and trick us and stuff like that. I really think anybody with a modicum of skill in software and computer engineering knows that you can unplug the computer. It's not going to do that. And we can safely engineer around that with sandboxes and things like that. And the sad thing that EAC sort of one of the reasons we grew, and now we have more we don't have membership or anything. There's no official EAC group or meeting or anything. But the reason more and more people are identifying with us is that you sort of look at this doomerism and you see how silly it is. That, this idea that, the Terminator's coming, we got to stop computer progress and get it regulated because the Terminator's coming. And that all the benefits we're going to get from this are worth pausing. It's a very, by the way, like privileged position. More people in India, and in fact, there's an R squared that's very sharp. For the wealthier the country, the more it wants regulation of AI. The poorer the country, the more they want, hey, we don't want to do all this work that, sure, you guys basically have us doing as a smaller economy. So I think that AGI is going to help humanity. I could see the fears, and I do think we have to move carefully. But I also see that, this will be like one of the greatest moments in civilization. And it can't be stopped in a lot of ways. So in many ways, we have to embrace it. Some hacker in some basement in any country in the world can put this out, and you can't regulate every hacker in every basement of the world. And we've learned that over the years, that no matter what you try to do, you can't stop human enterprise and human thought. So I think we have to learn to live with it, embrace it. And I think that the scare of like this is like the equivalent of an atom bomb in everyone's pocket, it's hyperbole. I think that having a computer in the phone of everyone's pocket, like an iPhone, is a revolution, and that this revolution will be bigger than that, but it won't make us, won't kill us or anything like that. And I just hope I'm right.
So it sounds like you think it's inevitable, and on the whole, you're optimistic.
That's the position. Is tech, if you look at the history of technology and the history of humanity, tech has only helped us. It doesn't mean that it'll always be that way. I'm not dumb enough to play into the fallacy that just because X happened before, X will continue to happen.
Sure.
But I also think that, there's some faith in that. And again, you can't uncork the bottle. You cannot tell people, oh, time out, stop thinking, stop progressing. It doesn't work that way. I'm always going to tinker with this computer until the day I die. And it'll never stop because my curiosity surpasses any law. My curiosity surpasses any, regulation. And the rest of the world is the same way. There's countries where if we made AI illegal tomorrow and we said we're going to burn every computer graphics processor, et cetera, maybe I'd move to another country. I just sort of find a way to do it anyway. Maybe I do it in an underground lab akin to the the Volstead Act or whatever, where alcohol is limited. So we'd find speakeasies to do our computer programming. I think that you can't suppress people's desires and emotions. And in fact, I've heard talk about somebody creating a censor-proof large language model that would live on the internet, be distributed, and nobody could ever break it, like Bitcoin. And I think that's a marvelous idea where, this Satoshi person who would be the equivalent would do this, maybe even be more important than the Bitcoin creator, to make AI really free and unregulated, because there are people in DC that are rubbing their grubby paws and saying, maybe we can tax this. Maybe we can have an AI committee. Maybe we can stock that committee with my friends. Maybe we can get some bribes and some lobbying around this. And that's the edifice that they build in DC to sort of both control us and empower themselves. And I hope that doesn't happen, but I also hope that somebody would break the back of it anyway.
I'd say, you bring up a little bit of an interesting point, maybe a deviation from some of your peers in the thinking, because there's been a lot of Sam Altmans and everybody getting before Congress and saying, we need regulation. And it sounds like to me, you're a little more suspicious that the regulation would be anything other than perhaps people that don't know what they're talking about lining their pockets.
Yeah, it's like most regulation, it's grift. And I've been battling the Federal Trade Commission, for example, in what's a landmark case, I think. And, I've looked at the history of the FTC. I can't find one thing in the history of the FTC that they did right. Not one thing. And I have a long list of things they fucked up. They said that AOL and Time Warner was going to create a behemoth in media that would be unsurpassed. Now, AOL and Time Warner didn't end up merging, but they didn't create much of a behemoth. And again, this is
they're now owned by Apollo, I believe. What's left of them, Apollo management gobbled them up.
fed for scraps into the private equity, dog food bowl.
Yeah.
And in essence, they've never gotten anything right, and it's a grandstanding organization that's 100% political. And if we do this for AI, all we're going to do is slow it down and let China and some other country catch up. But again, you cannot suppress the human spirit. It's the one, and if I'm a good sort of emblem of that. After going to prison, paying tens of millions of dollars in fees and fines, I am not 1 inch less optimistic about my life and about my condition. And I think that's one of the reasons people like me, is that I did 4 to 5 years in prison, and I'm sort of sitting here saying that, yeah, no big deal. Where's my computer? Let me get back to work. And I think that, that sort of sign where a lot of people are neurotic and would crumble if they ran out of mayonnaise or they're making a sandwich, I'm like one of these people that you can never, ever, get down no matter what you do. And I think that there are people like that move the world forward. Again, maybe they're the John Galts of the world or whatever, but and I wish I was smart enough to be the guy that makes AGI. But I think that whoever does it is going to be somebody who's irrepressible, somebody who's anti-consensus, a contrarian, someone who's a rebel, and that rebel is gonna change humanity forever. Again, we all hope it's gonna be for the better and not the worse, but we can't control that rebel. And I want that to tell that rebel to do it, keep going, and because I know you can't tell them to stop either. So we've all been that rebel at some point in our lives, and most people get it sort of jaded out of them. But I think that the John Carmacks of the world and the others that have the strength and the wisdom to make something like this happen, even the Sam Altmans and his staff, I think that they secretly will, and there's messages like Sam Altman said that in front of Congress, but there's messages you can look at that are publicly available that show that in their true heart of hearts, if they could push the button for AGI today, they'd push the button. And so lip service to a congressperson, he's probably smarter than I am. It's better to extend your hand than to give them the middle finger. And I chose the middle finger. He's extending the hand, but what's truly in his heart is not something any of us know.
That's fair. That's fair. Well, thank you, Martin. You're always industrious and always interesting. I find that on behalf of all big financial meme Instagram accounts, they're huge fans of yours. I don't know if you know that, but they all love you and respect you. You have the I don't know how many people, for people who have no context, you used to do like long videos, a long time ago, streams where you just break down stocks. I know you still do that from time to time, but I think you influenced quite a few people that are now working at bulge bracket banks, making FinMeme accounts that are quite large. So on behalf of them, thank you.
six different billionaires who watch my videos, and I think countless more that'll come from that, and hundreds and maybe even thousands of hedge fund analysts and bank analysts and stuff like that. And it's my pleasure. I think that a long time ago, a couple of people took a shot on me and showed me some of the ropes at Jim Cramer's firm, and I have to pay it forward for the next guy. And I think that I'm really, really glad that we could do that.
Great. Well, the always industrious, always interesting Martin Shrkeli. Thank you.
Thank you, Alec. Have a good one.
You too.
You too.